What's with all the fucking language? The Happytime murders. So, to say that I have been waiting for this movie to come out for a long time is an understatement. My memory's a little hazy, and I could be wrong about this, but to my memory, I first heard about Brian Henson trying to fund this project back when I was still in college. So we're talking over a decade ago. I remember first hearing about this project. So that's a lot of anticipation waiting for this thing to finally get made. And the initial trailers gave me a lot to worry about because I didn't know what I was necessarily hoping for, but it really did look from the trailers like it was going to be nothing but a raunchy comedy that was with puppets, and many of the jokes aren't that different from what would have been done in a raunchy comedy over a decade ago when this thing was originally planned. They just happened to be doing it with puppets. And having now seen the film, that is largely the case. And yet somehow I was okay with that. Which is weird, because I'm really picky about comedy, especially gimmicky comedy. Like, to me, the epitome of a gimmick, any gimmick, comedy gimmick, sci-fi gimmick, what have you, is if you remove that gimmick, is this a very bog standard thing that you just slapped a gimmick onto? I mean, that's what you get with a lot of, say, like found footage horror movies. Most of them are not telling anything new in the horror genre. They just slap a found footage gimmick on it. Or I mentioned this when I talked about Quiet Night In, the Inside Number 9 episode that a lot of people love, but if you remove the gimmick of the fact that it's nearly silent, what it's doing is really very run-of-the-mill. And in many ways, that is the case here. So I don't know if it's just a matter of I love the gimmick so much. Like, I love puppets. I've always loved puppets, and I've always had a special place in my heart for the Henson level of puppetry. It was one of the things that actually made it really hard for me to get through Peter Jackson's film from early in his career called Meet the Feebles, which is probably a better movie in terms of, having a bit more on his mind, the level of subversion and the sorts of things going on. Yet I enjoyed it much less, and I think a big part of what continually took me out of that was the level of puppetry was not up to par to what I was used to. And I don't even necessarily mean how the puppets themselves look. I mean the way they move, the way they act, the way they speak, the physicality of them. I was raised on Henson puppetry, and when puppetry is not up to that standard, it can oftentimes take me out of it, and it did with Meet the Feebles, but it drew me in here. Now, I had not seen the Rotten Tomatoes score or anything else before going to see this. I made a deliberate choice not to because I already knew that I was nervous going in, so I was really afraid that if I saw what the critics were saying, that it was going to completely taint my viewing of the thing. And the critics seemed to be rather rough on this, and it seems like a decent number of audience members are too. And I have to wonder if that has to do with expectations, because the obvious point of comparison for something like this would be Who Framed Roger Rabbit. And Who Framed Roger Rabbit, in addition to being a technological marvel, also had a lot on its mind. It very deliberately paralleled the tunes through its period setting and some of the specifics to black entertainers of that same time, where they were performing in spaces they themselves were not allowed in, and sort of how they were treated as entertainers and second-class citizens. There's like a tiny bit of that here, but it's not there as a subversion. It's there because All the Humans Hate the Puppets allows for them to not have to explain a lot of the jokes otherwise, because it just allows for the human characters to treat the puppets like crap. So here, there is a puppets as second-class citizens thing, but it's not to make a point. It doesn't work as a direct allegory for anything, honestly. It doesn't work as a class allegory. It doesn't work as a race allegory, although it has elements of all those things in there, but ultimately, the only reason puppets are prejudiced against are because it allows for a whole bunch of the humor that happens in this to go otherwise unexplained. Because if you don't just establish, well, humans treat puppets like crap, then you'd have to explain on a character-by-character basis why all these people are treating puppets like crap. So they remove that complication by just saying, most humans treat puppets like crap, and then you just move on. But again, I wonder if people were expecting this to have a bigger point when it doesn't. And it doesn't pretend to either. There's really no pretension in this, which I kind of appreciated. While I do love something like Who Framed Roger Rabbit that has a deeper point and has levels that you can read into it, and that's wonderful. But when you do that and it doesn't work, you just end up with pretentious, and that is really grating. And I would rather have something that, rather than having pretensions that it can't deliver on, just is what it is and owns it, which I think this does. And another thing that honestly went a long way for me is Melissa McCarthy, who is a performer I am very up and down on. I don't hate her. I've never hated her, but she's rarely done much for me. She has the best performance chemistry with the main puppet, Phil Phillips, in this that I've seen her have with any performer. She plays off of him so well. I loved seeing the two of them together. I love Phil Phillips, actually. He's probably my favorite character because he is just a grizzled noir private eye stereotype who happens to be a puppet. And again, I wonder if people were expecting them to play against the grain of that, but there's something about the fact that he's playing it straight. And he's not a puppety puppet. He's got very limited expression. His mouth just opens and closes, and he doesn't do the big, big exaggerated things. He's just kind of like, well, isn't this just a heck of a day kind of thing? And it works, and it stays entertaining. And his reactions always feel very real. He all of a sudden he walks into a murder scene. He's like, what the? And, and he'll swear, and I won't because I don't want to have to bleep that many things. But his reactions feel very genuine, and the fact that they're coming from a puppet make it work for me. It makes it work a little bit more than it would otherwise. As far as plot goes, it's pretty boilerplate noir, and it does work as a straight noir story. It borrows that sort of thing in terms of your dwindling roster of suspects, and trying to figure out what could the motivation be, and the misdirections, and the characters who's playing who against who, and that nobody's really a particularly good person across the board. And it's doing all that stuff again pretty much straight, just with puppets. And I don't want to overpraise this. It's not an amazing movie by any means, but just think of it as the fact that I had over a decade of anticipation for this thing, and I wasn't disappointed. It didn't blow my expectations away, but it was what I have wanted this movie to be since I first heard about it. It's a raunchy, gritty story with puppets. That's what I wanted. That's what I got. So I think if you can keep your expectations in check, it pretty much works. There are a few jokes that don't land especially well, but thankfully it's brisk enough and it keeps a good enough pace that generally a joke landing flat doesn't just sit there forever. I think the one big exception is there's a running gag where people keep either jokingly or mistakenly saying that Melissa McCarthy looks like a man, which she doesn't, at all. And I'm not saying she's incapable of looking like a man, but she doesn't look like a man. She's not a particularly feminine woman, but she doesn't look like a guy. So I don't know why they made a running joke out of that, because it doesn't run. They made a stumbling joke out of that just keeps stumbling into frame again. Not entirely sure why they did that, but that's the only thing that stuck out of my mind is being boy, that didn't work. And if I wanted to be nitpicky at it, I could nitpick a lot of stuff in it, but I don't want to. And I know I can be nitpicky. I know I have a tendency to do that, but every now and then something comes along that just kind of makes me happy. And I know it's not great art, and if I was in a vindictive mood, I could nitpick the heck out of it, but I don't want to because I enjoyed it. And I don't feel like undercutting that. That's basically where I land here. So the Happytime Murders, I get the idea that I have a much higher opinion of this movie than a lot of people seem to, but I enjoyed it. I think it's one that if you've been seeing the critic responses and something, oh, I won't watch that. If you're like me and you grew up on Henson level puppetry, I say give it a shot. I mean, know what you're getting into, know what it is, know what it isn't, And I think it's worth a go, because even if you just appreciate Henson style puppetry, it's got that, and it's as good as it is in anything else. So that's not nothing. So the Happytime Murders, have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. There's also a bunch of buttons and links, including one to the Patreon, so check those out if you care. So remember, folks, you are the council. I just run the meetings, and until next time, this council is adjourned.